2020 has been a ride full of unexpected and at times unexplainable events, riddled with disease, disaster, and much more. 2020 has changed the world for better or worse. Today, we are recounting the 15 most shocking events of the year. Events that you would have never expected to happen at the beginning of the year, starting with 15. Rick Moranis, the beloved actor in classic movies such as Ghostbusters and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, was walking near Central Park when a man in an I Heart New York shirt randomly punched Rick Moranis, knocking him over. The man only punched Moranis once, then continued walking as if nothing happened. Moranis took himself to the hospital immediately after. He only had minor injuries. The man was identified as Marquise Ventura, a homeless man with a long record of mental illness and punching random people in the face. 2 weeks after the attack on Moranis, Ventura attacked a random stranger again, but this time he was arrested. He was charged with 2 counts of assault, disorderly conduct, and harassment. Since the first International Summer Olympics were held in 1896, there have been 3 times the Olympics have been cancelled. 1. In 1916, the outbreak of World War I 2 years prior forced Germany to cancel the event. In 1940 and 1944, the Summer Olympics was cancelled because of the outbreak of World War II in 1939. Now, the Summer Olympics of 2020 meant to be held in Tokyo can be added to that list. After the outbreak of COVID-19 all over the world, Japan and the International Olympic Committee agreed to postpone the Olympics until 2021. Japan had invested $12.6 billion into the 2020 Olympics, and some estimates show that their annual GDP will be reduced by 1.4% because of this decision. The mounting pressure on Japan from different countries and athletes made their decision no surprise. At the height of the COVID-19 hysteria, when stay-at-home orders were mandated worldwide, a crime docuseries was released on Netflix called Tiger King. The docuseries focused on the bizarre rivalry between Joe Exotic, a private zoo owner, and Carol Baskin, a big cat sanctuary owner. The eccentric world of Tiger King became the perfect distraction from the COVID pandemic. 34 million people watched the docuseries within the first 10 days of its release. The docuseries is unlike anything audiences have seen before and exposes the morally reprehensible underbelly of Joe Exotic's life.
Keep rolling, keep rolling. Now this is the kind of movies we're gonna make here, okay? Woo!
On January 3rd, U.S. forces assassinated Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian general, by a drone strike. 5 days after, Iran responded by launching numerous ballistic missiles at American bases in the Middle East. Iran warned the U.S. military of the attack beforehand to avoid any casualties. As Iran waited to see what the U.S. military would do, Iran's air defenses were on high alert. Simultaneously, a Ukrainian passenger jet was preparing to take off their scheduled flight from Tehran to Kiev. The plane carried 167 passengers and 9 crew members. Minutes after the takeoff, the passenger jet was shot down by 2 missiles. Initially, Iran denied responsibility and claimed it was scientifically impossible for them to be involved, but after more evidence surfaced, Iran took full responsibility and claims that their air defense system, there were no survivors. During a major crisis, it's natural for citizens to depend on their elected officials to lead them out of the crisis. This is especially true during an election year when citizens are concerned about what is going to lead them next. So when US President Donald Trump announced that he had contracted COVID-19, American citizens were sent into a spiral out of either concern, grief, or anxiety. Shortly after the announcement, Trump was transported to Walter Reed Hospital for treatment. His physicians kept reassuring the public that Trump was doing really well with the therapeutics he was given. After 3 days in the hospital, Trump was cleared by his physicians to return to the White House, where he stated he felt better than he did 20 years ago. A week later, Trump tested negative for COVID and was cleared to resume his normal schedule. Eddie Van Halen is known as one of the best guitarists to ever exist in the music industry. His music and his band, Van Halen, re-established rock and roll at the forefront of the music scene. Eddie Van Halen died on October 6th after a long fight with cancer. First being reported on Eddie's son, Wolfgang's Twitter account, the news took the world by storm. Eddie's battle with cancer started in 2000 with tongue cancer. He was treated, had a third of his tongue removed, and declared himself cancer-free in 2002. Unfortunately, that did not remain true, and in 2011, the cancer returned, but this time the cancer had spread to his throat. Ever since Harvey Weinstein's career began as a film producer in 1979, it has slowly devolved from prestige and power to abuse and perversion. Women have accused Harvey Weinstein of various misconduct throughout his entire career, but it wasn't until recently when legal options against Harvey Weinstein were talked about more seriously. On May 25th of 2018, Harvey Weinstein was charged with first and third degree rape and a first degree criminal sex act. Weinstein pleaded not guilty on all counts. Over time, additional charges were brought against Harvey Weinstein, and by the time of his trial in 2020, he had 5 charges against him with the possibility of life in prison. The trial marked a huge turning point in the film industry and a monumental success with the #MeToo movement. By the end, Harvey was found guilty on 2 of the 5 counts, and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Californian citizens were terrorized by the Golden State Killer. The killer committed crimes all across California, receiving different nicknames from law enforcement. He was called the Visalia Ransacker for the over 100 burglaries and 1 murder that took place in Visalia, California from 1973 to 1976. The East Area Rapist for the 50 rapes and murders in Sacramento from 1976 to 1979. And the original Night Stalker for the many brutal murders that took place in Southern California in 1979 to 1986. For decades, the identity of the killer was unknown and the crimes of the Golden State Killer remained unsolved. It wasn't until 2018 that law enforcement would get their break in the case by running DNA recovered from the Golden State Killer's crime scenes through a for-profit genealogy database that many people use to trace their family trees. Law enforcement was able to identify the family members linked to the Golden State Killer, and soon after, the Golden State Killer was unmasked as Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. DeAngelo was a father, husband, and a police officer until his firing in 1979. He was arrested in 2018 and charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder, which increased to 13 counts by his court date. He confessed to many of his crimes and pleaded guilty on all accounts in exchange for the prosecutors to not seek the death penalty. On August 21st, 2020, DeAngelo was given multiple life sentences and is expected to live out the rest of his days in prison.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Only 2 presidents have been impeached in U.S. history. Bill Clinton for lying to Congress about Monica Lewinsky, and Andrew Johnson for removing the Secretary of War from office. Richard Nixon resigned before he can be impeached for the Watergate scandal. Now, 2020 marks another year a U.S. president is impeached, but in a turn of events, not removed. The impeachment revolves around Trump's alleged coercion to get Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, to investigate the family of his political opposition, the Bidens. The allegations got more intense when a mysterious whistleblower came out with allegations that they had overheard a Trump-Zelensky phone call where Trump promises the Ukrainian president something in return for an investigation into Hunter Biden. The controversy ran for an entire year, and on December 18, 2019, the House of Representatives approved the articles of impeachment and sent the articles to the Senate. This marks the first impeachment where a congressman and woman voted within party lines. The Senate, which was a Republican majority, acquitted Trump of all of his charges on February 5, 2020. Earlier this year, pictures and videos surfaced showing red skies over San Francisco and other western United States cities. It led to many on social media to compare the visuals on the West Coast to dystopian films like Blade Runner 2049. The red skies were a result of the wildfires that had been ravaging through the forest all throughout 2020, and most notably, marks the largest wildfire season in Californian history. The wildfire season started in April with a few wildfires in Washington, and by August there were more than 300 wildfires that destroyed more than 1 million acres, and with no signs of stopping anytime soon. Many of the wildfires started because of human causes. The El Dorado fire in San Bernardino was started by a pyrotechnic device at a gender reveal party. The fire grew to destroy 22,000 acres and resulted in the death of a firefighter. Other wildfires were started by lightning strikes, downed power wires, poor forest management practices, and record dry weather. The fires resulted in 13,000 buildings destroyed and 46 deaths. The 2019 and 20 bushfire season, otherwise known as Black Summer, was a prolonged, cataclysmic event that left billions of people feeling hopeless. The widespread of bushfires resulted in 46 million acres destroyed, millions of animals killed, and the death of 34 people. The bushfires began spreading widely in September of 2019, and the bushfire season peaked around the beginning of 2020. The fires became so out of control that it began to affect other countries as well. The smoke from the bushfires traveled over 7,000 miles to South America. It's estimated that 447 people died, indirectly, from smoke inhalation. Experts have expressed immense concern over endangered species in Australia, and have predicted that some endangered species may now be extinct because of the bushfires. The bushfires were a perfect storm of record hot temperature and record dry weather, and experts believe that they are likely to see bushfires of similar scale in the future. Now getting to the top of the list, we get to the moments that shocked us to our core and left us speechless. There isn't a more fitting moment than the morbid death of Chadwick Boseman. It was the death that no one expected, partly because no one knew what to expect. Boseman was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in 2016 and kept the diagnosis private. Outside of a handful of family and friends, no one knew Boseman was sick, and by 2020 his colon cancer had entered stage 4. He underwent chemotherapy as treatment and multiple surgeries, but never stopped working on film productions. He became a breakout star in the film 42, and then moved on to become the iconic superhero Black Panther. He was a role model to many, and an inspiration to many more. The video of George Floyd's death took the world by storm. Never in history has a video received such a powerful response across the entire world. Soon after that video was released, racial justice protests sprouted up all over the entire world. People from all different backgrounds were calling for justice and police reform. It's estimated that on June 6 alone, 500,000 of people participated in demonstrations around the nation. But with millions of people rallying out of anger and frustration in thousands of places, it was only a matter of time until that anger turned into violence. leading a new problem with riots. Less than 10% of demonstrations turned into riots, but these riots controlled the conversation for months. The stories of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others are still being fought for to this day. Of all the shocking deaths of 2020, this is one, if not the most shocking death of the year. Kobe Bryant was one of the best and most famous NBA players of all time. Many would say he was the face of the NBA. He inspired generations of people everywhere to strive to do their best in anything they do. He was a legend at 41 years old. On January 26th, Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter Gianna, and 7 others all traveled by helicopter to Mamba Sports Academy for a basketball game. The helicopter was flying in extreme fog, and the pilot was advised to stay low. At 9:45 a.m., the helicopter crashed into a hill, killing everyone on board. The first thing anyone will think of when they think of 2020 is COVID-19, which is a virus that no one knew existed until the beginning of this year. COVID-19 has changed any plans anyone made at the beginning of the year and may have changed the world forever. The virus originated in Wuhan, China, near the end of 2019, and in only months ahead, spread all around the world to create a global pandemic. No moment will catch the hysteria that existed at the beginning of the year. Currently at 80 million infected, 45 million recovered, and 1.76 million dead. It does not look like COVID-19 is going anywhere anytime soon, especially not for 2021. The global pandemic is, in our opinion, the most unexpected event of 2020. But if you have another opinion, leave a comment and tell us what your 15 most shocking events of 2020 are.